The second topic of the exam is called navigating and customizing the user interface. The two main areas that we are going to discuss here are the working with panels and menus and using workspaces. The reason why there is a whole topic dedicated to this part of Photoshop is because it's highly customizable. And in order to use the application efficiently, you really need to know about these features, because you can save a lot of time and effort if you set up your workspace the way it's intended to be used. In this first video, I'm just going to give you an overview of this topic, but then I'm going to go into details of each of the areas in the following videos. So first of all, it is very important to know the names of the parts of the Photoshop user interface. We have here on the left the toolbar, or also referred to sometimes as the tools panel. And here on the top we have the options bar, or sometimes also called control bar. Then on the right we have the panels, but these are again highly customizable, so they can be moved around and turned into floating or iconic states. I'm going to explain everything about them in the following video. Then we have a drop-down menu here, which is called the workspace switcher. And then we have on the top the menus. So these are the Photoshop menus. And the area where we see the image itself is called the document window, which has the tab here on the top, which shows the name, the zoom ratio, the color mode, and the bit depth. And if I make any changes to the image, it will also show a little asterisk at the end. Once I save this change, that will disappear. And last but not least, we have the status bar here at the bottom. So there we can again see the zoom ratio, and we have a couple of other options like the sync options, because with the Creative Cloud version of Photoshop, now we are able to sync our settings between computers. And it's available whenever you are logged in with your Creative Cloud account. Then you also have the share on Behance option here at the bottom. And then here you can change the options what you want to see. These are all information about the document that it's open. By default it shows the document sizes, but you can change it, for example, to document dimensions. You can change the brightness of the background by right-clicking on it, and you can choose a color from here. So you can set it even to a custom color by choosing select custom color. Or you can set it back to the default by just simply again right-click, and from the context menu choose default. If you go into the preferences, which you will find under the Photoshop menu if you are on Mac, so here is preferences, and you will find the same thing on PC under the edit menu at the bottom. But let's just go into preferences and choose interface. Under interface you will find the color theme option, where you can change the interface, and if you have a look at it in the background you can see how it changes. So from a very bright user interface we can go to the darkest one. I prefer this darker gray version, but you can also customize each of the screen modes, so the colors for each of the screen modes, and even options for the border effects separately. The things you can customize apart from the brightness of the interface are the panels, the menus, and the keyboard shortcuts. So these are the things that essentially you will be able to save into a new workspace. Well, I'm going to talk about that in more details. I just want to show it here that the panel locations will be saved by default into a workspace, and keyboard shortcuts and menus are optional. You can also save those into a custom workspace. And to change these, the keyboard shortcuts and menus you will find under the edit menu. So there you can find menus and keyboard shortcuts. And the panel locations you can just simply drag and move panels around, or you can find panels that are not visible under the window menu. So there's the list of the panels. Let me just show you the menus option. If I choose menus, I can see all the menu options that are available from the Photoshop menus. And what I can do is to hide these. So for example, I just hid the new option under file menu, and that means if I accept these changes, I won't see that option there. So you might ask, why is it necessary to hide an option? Well, you might be able to simplify the Photoshop menus. If there's a couple of things that you definitely don't need, you can just simply hide them and then save a workspace for the simplified version. And if you want to go back to the default version, you can just simply switch between workspaces. So you can hide or show menu items, but you can also change their color. So for example, I can give a color label to new. I just highlight it with red, and maybe I'm going to just hide the browsing mini bridge option because I don't really use that much. So now if I click on OK, I will go to the file menu, and you can see new is highlighted and browsing mini bridge is missing. So if I want to change these, now I have to go back to the edit menu. From the menus, choose Photoshop defaults. So that will go back to the normal, and I can either save these settings or in this case, I'm not going to save them. And while I'm here in the menus, I can also switch to keyboard shortcuts, and there I can make changes to any of the keyboard shortcuts, and I can assign them to the options from the application menus. So for example, I change the step backward and forward always to function 1 and function 2 keys, because they are just easier to use than the default keyboard shortcut, the Control or Command Z and Control Command Shift Z. And the way you change them is very simple. You just click on it and then press the keys that you would like to use for a feature. Remember that you have to use either a function key or a combination of one of the characters or numbers together with Command or Control on PC. And then of course you can incorporate other modifier keys like Shift or Alt, otherwise called as Option key on Mac. So for example, for step backward, I have function 1. If I try to press like R, that will say it's an invalid shortcut because it has to include either the Command or Control on PC or one of the function keys. So if I press Command R, for example, then it will be possible to use, but it warns me that it's already being used for the View Rulers option. I can add Shift as well, so Command Shift R or Command Alt Shift R together, and then as you can see, it will still be used by Photoshop because there are so many keyboard shortcuts that there is even an option called Summarize, which will create a HTML file that will show all your settings that you assigned, or you can also have a look at all the default keyboard shortcuts that way. I'm just going to change this back to F1, and I'm just going to click on Accept here at the bottom, or you can also click here on Accept. And you can always save a keyboard shortcut set if you want to. I'm just going to override this and save it. And shortcuts can be assigned for panel menus as well, and also for tools. And I'm going to talk about these in more details later. And there's one more thing I would like to mention, and that's the application frame option under the window menu, which is by default turned off. And this is only if you work on a Mac. So you can always turn this off, and then you will be able to see through Photoshop, so there won't be any background or frame. So I can actually see bridge in the background. Now this is not really the way I like to work. I prefer to see that application frame to prevent accidentally switching to the desktop or other applications in the background. So I usually have this turned on. And that's all I wanted to show you in this overview of this topic. In the following video, I'm going to explain everything you need to know about panels and menus.